What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video, well, you guys can see what we're doing here. It is our yearly Fallen Heroes banner, which means broken units. But not actually. I know that a lot of you are looking forward or are really anticipating the power level of these types of units, and I'm here to basically dissect and analyze all these to my best potential. Of course, it's mostly first impressions, but after we have the stats in full, then I will do a more in-depth analysis that's mostly just going to be my first impressions and reactions on these characters. So yeah, if you guys enjoy this content and you really want to show it, the best F2P way of doing so is to smash the like button and turning it blue. That shows me that you guys appreciate these videos and that I can keep doing what I'm doing. And for those of you that are not subbed, well, just click the subscribe button. Alright? Furthermore, if you want to support the content I do and keep me going for a longer period of time, then consider the Patreon description below or come check me out on Twitch. That's it. Video sponsored by you guys, not by anyone else. Let's do this thing.
Foolish
All right.
humans.
So,
did you really think you could?
First up is a red dragon version of Lilith, as opposed to her blue alt. Now, with Lilith, it is already pretty interesting on her original form because it was more support-based. And as we'll see in a moment, kind of replicates this exact same style, even in her fallen form. Her stat spread is still fairly similar to what it was in her blue alt as our blue original version, because it is mostly based in attack and speed. So it's given to its hero as 56-46. But what is really cool about Lilith is the fact that she's a flyer, and flyers don't normally have access to null follow-up or dodge, which is effectively just the speed damage reduction, giving a speed check between her and her opponent, and if it's higher then she has damage reduction. So this is like really good for Lilith because most flyers don't have access to this sort of stuff, but Lilith does. So her weapon, as we can see here, is a pretty similar effect. It's within 2 spaces of any support, and you can pretty much choose any unit in the game to do that. She's going to gain a null follow-up effect and also give a null follow-up effect to an ally. So as a support unit, I think she actually ranks pretty highly, because the only other character I can think of that gives a null follow-up is of course Legendary Male Byleth. But even Legendary Male Byleth's null follow-up effect has a speed condition. So this one ends up being pretty nice because now you can use her in a way that could support units or let's say fast but don't have access to null follow-up, and therefore create these really good win checks. Or just characters with auto double, that also works too, assuming you don't run into an enemy null follow-up. Now, Lilith is also the bringer of the brand new Speed Smoke 4 skill, and that's where that whole dodge aspect comes from. So the default Speed Smoke skill 3 effect is still here, but it also grants speed and dodge. But she's a flyer, and dodge, again, as I said, is not usually accessible to flyers. So in terms of inheritance, I suspect that the Speed Smoke is probably given to like melee units. I don't see them giving dodge to like range units. That's still a pretty rare thing. You pretty much find that on some refines like alt, but generally speaking, it's going to be pretty useful. As a one-off though, Lilith is going to be great for some support capabilities. Next up is Ninian as a blue dragon infantry, the same exact idea. In fact, her stat spread is even similar to the original form, with a very low attack, a pretty high HP, which is great because of course she does have that odd pulse tie in the B skill, as we'll talk about in a moment, and some other pretty unique mechanics which we'll mention right about now. So as we'll see here, she has a preference dance skill, a preference weapon, and odd pulse time B duel. So B duel is an addition to the pool because the only other character that has this is Marianne, and the odd pulse tie was previously only locked to, I believe, seasonal Obro, so very, very rare. But now, of course, it's in the permanent pool, so that's awesome. Let's talk about the dance, and let's talk about the weapon. So with the weapon first to start off with, it's pretty similar to Triandra's weapon in the game, which inflicts pretty much a debuff, an attack and res, and then a guard effect on the cardinal directions of both Ninian and the person she's dancing. Additionally, she has a little bit of a speed res debuff on foes. I guess this will just help out her combat, but fairly insignificant. The awesome part there is inflicting the guard status effect. Now, her preference dance is also pretty unique because, again, there's not really any way to provide this support capability, so I think she will act as a fairly unique option as a dancer, where she's going to give attack 6, so that's whatever, that's not that great. But the other part here is where she pretty much gives like a breath type effect, and it's not enemy phase locked, mind you. It's pretty much just special acceleration on her allies' attacks or the foes' attacks that have combat for one turn. So it's a pretty unique buff, and I think that's also great. But if that wasn't all, she also has an additional movement buff for dragons. Now, a lot of dragons in the game aren't really going to benefit from a move increase. Nothing really stands out to me as a unit being able to really benefit from this, but it could work with maybe some armored dragons who actually would appreciate that movement buff. So I'd probably be thinking of literally an armored dragon in this banner that's coming up, or other ones like a Dune, potentially Myrrh, or even Tiki could really benefit from this movement buff so that they can just get around better and you're not relying on, let's say, order skills or guidance or something like that. So not bad. Again, support units tend to age pretty well, so I'm pretty happy to see something like this exist, and it being on Ninian is also awesome since Ninian is awesome. Alright, so this one's a bit overdue.
My flesh has been
this is like overdue. I feel like Gustav himself has been he's been in the game for probably over 3-4 years in this exact art and model. So they were like, okay, where do we just grab some old asset and then release it in the game? So welcome Gustav, like 3-4 laters from when you were actually released in the game. But yeah, so this one sticks out a bit like a sore thumb. But hey, maybe some of you are pretty happy to see him. Let me know in the comments. Alright, so with Gustav, we do have access to Attack Smoke 4 now. That's something new that he brings to the table. Attack Smoke 4 as fodder acts differently than what the Speed Smoke 4 does, which is still going to retain that attack debuff, but it's also going to add a defense res 6 buff to the user, and then cause the foe to not be able to do a follow-up. So this is pretty good for like a tanking option in the C skill. I don't know if it's necessarily going to outclass some of the other really good C skills, such as Joint Drive Attack, or Pulse Smoke, or Fatal Smoke. Those are all really good too. So I'm not 100% sure whether I would call it a step up, but it's still another option, and at least it'll show up in Hall of Forms. So that's something notable. With the weapon itself, slaying, so that does help out with his bonfire. He's got a 25% HP condition, which is of course almost always active. He debuffs foes, and then gives himself special acceleration and a guard effect on the enemy. On top of that, as long as whatever he's attacking into can attack back, or it initiates on him, he gets a guaranteed follow-up. So auto double, trace, pretty good kit, and a bunch of other effects with acceleration means that he's gonna be pretty annoying to deal with, but I feel like this role is already fairly covered by somebody like Oder, and Kanto itself doesn't have much use in something like Summoner Duels right now due to Kanto control. So in terms of this banner, I'd probably call Gustav pretty weak. He might find some use on air defense, but I don't know. I'm not totally convinced.
Understand.
Alright, and probably the all-star of this banner. It's a spoiler alert. Rhea in another alt, and it isn't actually her OG form. Well, maybe it is. Depends how you look at it. Okay, colorless armored dragon. Usually armored dragons aren't really in a good spot, but There's going to be, as you see in a moment, quite stacked on effects. Let's start off by looking at the weapon before we jump into the preference B skill. She does at least come with near save, which is great. If you were to use her with far save, that would mean that you'd be swapping out the A skill for distant counter, likely, just so she can retaliate properly. So with the weapon, we have a Slaying Breath, which is pretty good because, again, a Slaying Breath will give you access to harder hitting specials or potentially better heals as well. The condition on that one is foe initiates combat or foe HP 75%, so definitely more of a focus towards enemy phase as opposed to, let's say, Fallen Edelgard, which was a more player phase oriented type character, or both phases. You could probably use her on both pretty well, but definitely there wasn't a penalty or, let's say, a bias towards the enemy phase. So her weapon is just going to give her more of an attack boost, an enemy attack debuff, which makes her tankier, of course, gives her bit more consistent combat, but on top of that there is a deals damage equals 40% of foes res as addition onto that weapon, which means that she's going to be cutting a lot of enemy res and doing some very hefty damage. So it's kind of like almost a Luna type effect in the weapon itself. In addition to that is that there is a Worry Fighter effect, both for herself and her enemies. This is the same as what Fallen Edelgard had last year, which means you're not going to be really using her with, let's say, QR or any sort of auto double effects to win. But the cool thing here actually is, of course, that there exists these units with, like, let's say, no follow-up that could be combined with Rhea, which is literally like Lilith on this banner. So if Lilith was supportive, let's say Rhea, with Rhea here, sorry, then she would be able to actually double herself, let's say with QR, but still deny the enemy double. So there's some interesting interactions there. Or if she has a serviceable, let's say, speed stat, then you could use someone like Legendary Lucina and give her an auto double and still deny the enemy double. So this is quite an interesting mechanic that could be taken advantage of so that she could, let's say, do doubles and deny doubles using the right allied support. Now, the preference B skill is not inheritable. It is a preference B skill similar to what Fallen Edelgard came with, but not exactly the same. Or rather, it's not really the same skill, but there are some similarities here. So it is a res check, just like the original Dragon Wall effect, and it's going to give her a lot of damage reduction. Unfortunately, despite how much damage reduction is in this weapon and tons of different effects to help that out, it's still going to be weak to something like Deadeye. I do appreciate that it has some damage reduction versus AoE, because I feel like in Summoner Duels, AoE effects have become a little bit more rampant to cut through tank units, so the fact that there is damage reduction associated with AoE is quite a good thing in here. But this is pretty much a bunch of res checks in here, and there's not really more that I'm going to talk about it right here. It's useful, but I do think it's weak to lethality and Deadeye, which is fairly common and going to make it a lot less inconsistent. Or, yeah, a lot less consistent, rather. So, on the top of that, it does have a little bit of a heal, but it's whatever. It's pretty much a better Dragon Wall. The real thing that will make her stand out is going to be this weapon, where if an enemy has low res, she probably just one-shots. If an enemy has high res, she probably just cuts through most of that res. So after we get the stats on all this, we are going to be covering, I'd say, maybe more than just Rhea in the upcoming analysis. Should you pull community type video, be sure to check out the community tab and let me know what you plan to do on this banner. If you plan to spark, if you plan to summon a lot for these characters, and of course in the comments section, please let me know which one is you're most interested in, or maybe something I might have overlooked. Feel free to let me know. Alright folks, with that being said, this is our upcoming Fallen banner. Maybe not as appealing to some of you as, let's say, last year, but there are some pretty unique units here that are worth talking about. I do feel like both Lilith and Ninian add some quite good support options. Gustav is pretty meh as far as the other units are concerned, but maybe he can find some use on air defense. And finally, Rhea, compared to other colorless armored dragons, like, let's say, Duma or Fallen Tiki, she should stand out a little bit more than those and find, let's say, some use in something like Summoner Duels or potentially another tank option in AR offense, or even AR defense, somebody that's really difficult to bust through. Alright guys, that's all from me. As always, feel free to smash the like button. Always helps out the channel, lets me know that you guys love this content. I will see you in tomorrow's video featuring a more thorough analysis of these characters once we have the stats data mined. Love you all, and see you in the next one. Peace.